On July 14, 1974, nearly 40,000 people gathered at Lake Sammamish State Park. In broad daylight, surrounded by families, two young women vanished within 4 hours of each other. Witnesses recalled a polite, handsome young man in a white arm sling who introduced himself as Ted, but Ted wasn't a shadowy stranger. He was a promising law student sitting in the front row of a university class. Before police could stop him, he would leap from a second-story courthouse window, crawl through a prison ceiling duct, and escape high-security custody twice, spreeing across 5 states. He turned his 1979 televised trial into a theatrical performance, cross-examining police officers himself. This is the story of how Ted Bundy fooled an entire nation. The nightmare began 5 months earlier in Seattle, when young women started vanishing from their college dorms without a sound, a struggle, or a single trace. Witnesses recalled a handsome man wearing a white arm sling, introducing himself as Ted and asking women to help him unload a sailboat from his car. Janice Ott and Denise Naslund vanished within 4 hours of each other. Police released a composite sketch of Ted and his tan Volkswagen Beetle. The police tip line was flooded with over 2,000 calls a day. 4 different people, including his girlfriend Elizabeth Klopfer, named Theodore Robert Bundy. At the time, police had no computerized records. Detectives buried under index cards discarded the tips, believing a clean-cut law student couldn't be a killer. Months later, hunters found human remains on Taylor Mountain. The Pacific Northwest investigations had stalled, but Bundy had already moved on. In August 1974, Bundy relocated to Salt Lake City after being accepted into the University of Utah College of Law. Within weeks of his arrival, young women began disappearing in Utah and neighboring Idaho. On November 8, 1974, Bundy approached 18-year-old Carol Duranch at a shopping mall, posing as an undercover police officer named Officer Roseland. He convinced her to get into his car to identify a suspected burglar, but minutes later he pulled over and slapped a handcuff onto one of her wrists. Carol Duranch fought back fiercely, opened the passenger door, and fell onto the roadway. She flagged down a passing car and escaped. Carol Duranch became one of the extremely few survivors of Ted Bundy. Her detailed description gave police their first major breakthrough. 9 months later, on August 16, 1975, Utah Highway Patrol Sergeant Bob Hayward noticed a tan Volkswagen cruising a residential neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. When the officer turned on his high beams, the Beetle sped off, running 2 stop signs before pulling over. A search of the car revealed a crowbar, an ice pick, handcuffs, a ski mask, and a pantyhose mask. Bundy claimed he used them for household chores. In February 1976, Carol Duranch took the witness stand and pointed directly at Bundy. He was convicted of aggravated kidnapping. Sentenced to 1 to 15 years, Bundy was incarcerated in Utah State Prison, but detectives in Colorado were building a murder case against him. Hair samples found in Bundy's Volkswagen matched Karen Campbell, a nurse who had disappeared from a resort in Aspen, Colorado. In January 1977, Bundy was extradited to Aspen, Colorado to stand trial for capital murder. Dismissing his public defenders, Bundy chose to represent himself. As his own attorney, he was granted special privileges, including access to the court law library. On June 7, 1977, during a court recess, Bundy opened a second-story library window and leaped 30 feet to the ground below. He sprinted across town and scaled Aspen Mountain, hiding in the thick pine forests, while a massive manhunt combed the valley. Roadblocks were erected across Pitkin County. For 6 days, Bundy survived in abandoned hunter cabins, stealing food and warm clothing. Exhausted, frostbitten, and limping from a sprained ankle, Bundy stole a car on June 13th. 2 officers spotted the weaving vehicle and recaptured him. Bundy was transferred to the maximum security Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs. Unshaken by his recapture, he immediately began planning a second escape. Over 6 months, Bundy obtained a hacksaw blade from other inmates. He cut a precise 12-inch square hole around the light fixture in his cell ceiling. He intentionally lost over 20 pounds so his athletic frame could squeeze through the tiny ceiling opening into the crawl space above. On New Year's Eve 1977, while jail staff were off duty for the holiday, Bundy dropped into the head jailer's apartment and walked out the front door into the snow. It took 17 hours before jailers realized Bundy was missing. By the time they entered his cell, he was already on a flight to Chicago. By January 8, 1978, Bundy had arrived in Tallahassee, Florida. Renting a room near Florida State University under the alias Chris Hagen, he went into hiding. In the early morning hours of January 15, 1978, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house through an unlatched rear door. Within 15 terrifying minutes, 4 female students were viciously attacked in their sleep. 2, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, lost their lives. Minutes later, Bundy broke into a nearby apartment block, attacking student Cheryl Thomas before fleeing into the night. Investigators gathered vital forensic evidence at the scene, including blood samples, fiber evidence, and clear physical bite impressions. 3 weeks later in Lake City, Florida, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach vanished from her junior high school. She would be Bundy's final victim. On February 15, 1978 at 1 a.m., Pensacola officer David Lee spotted an orange Volkswagen Beetle driving slowly in an industrial area. When the officer ran the license plate, it came back stolen. Bundy fought violently, kicking the officer's legs out before being subdued at gunpoint. Bundy initially gave a fake name, but fingerprint matching at the Pensacola station revealed his true identity to stunned Florida detectives. Florida authorities realized they had captured one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives, ending a nationwide manhunt. In June 1979, the Chi Omega murder trial opened in Miami. It was the first trial in U.S. history to be broadcast live on national television. Bundy insisted on co-representing himself, using the courtroom as a stage to grandstand, object to evidence, and question witnesses. He personally cross-examined investigating officers and forensic experts, treating the double murder trial like a theatrical debate. The prosecution's key breakthrough came from Dr. Richard Souveron, a forensic odontologist who presented full-scale dental casting matches. On July 24, 1979, after 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Ted Bundy guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Judge Edward Cowart sentenced Bundy to death by electrocution, uttering famous words about Bundy's wasted potential. 6 months later in Orlando, Bundy was tried for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach and received a 3rd death sentence. For nearly a decade, Bundy resided on death row at Florida State Prison in Stark, filing endless federal appeals. Even from prison, Bundy granted numerous media interviews, analyzing the psychology of serial killers while maintaining his own innocence. As his execution date neared in early 1989 and all legal stays were exhausted, Bundy changed his strategy completely. In a desperate bid to delay execution, Bundy began confessing to FBI agents and detectives, detailing over 30 murders across 7 states. Investigators believe the true victim count exceeded 30. Bundy took critical details of several undiscovered victims to his grave. On the morning of January 24, 1989, hundreds of spectators, reporters, and law enforcement officers gathered outside Florida State Prison. At 7:06 a.m., Theodore Robert Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair, known as Old Sparky. He was pronounced dead at 7:16 a.m. When the prison spokesman announced his execution to the crowd outside, cheers erupted and fireworks were launched into the morning sky. The Bundy case exposed fundamental flaws in American policing, specifically how serial offenders exploit jurisdiction borders and lack of shared databases. In response, the FBI established VICAP, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, to track multi-jurisdictional serial crimes nationwide. Decades later, the forensic lessons learned from the Bundy investigation helped pioneer modern genetic genealogy and behavioral profiling. Bundy destroyed the comforting myth that serial killers are easily recognizable monsters lurking in the shadows. He was a charming, educated man who used society's trust and politeness as a weapon against his victims. His legacy remains a chilling warning to law enforcement and society. True danger can hide behind the most polished smile. 50 years later, the stories of his victims are remembered, not the man who tried to hide behind a law degree.